Hello, welcome to Roussel Reads. I'm Deja, and today we are going to do the rest of my 2024 DNFs. I really wanted the last half of the year to be even better than the first half. I started off the year with a 5 star, and unfortunately, I did not end the year the same way. So, I already did part one of my 2024 DNS, and if you would like to check that out, I'll link that up above and down below. But here are the rest of the books that I DNF'd for 2024. So the first book that I DNF'd in the second half of the year was Malicia. And this one, I think it was purely just because of me. Like, I think that a lot of people will actually like this. It is a horror set in an amusement park, and it's following these teens, and it just has all of those like creepy elements. And I think for me, when it comes to this book, I just was not connecting. You're following so many characters, there's 4 different perspectives, and I feel like the tension and the horror was there, and it was very fast paced, but I'm such a character driven reader that like I feel like I wanted a little bit more with the characters, and I just was not getting that. Pair that with the fact that I'm not really like a horror like reader anyway, I just decided to DNF it because it just wasn't like hooking me. The next one that I have is Daughters of Henri, and I remember this book making its round in the Black book community, and this book was very boring. I think that it had potential to be amazing. The world seemed interesting, and I really liked the dynamic of trying to follow these twin girls that have been like separated. But honestly, I think the pacing was the biggest issue of this one. Like, it was so slow, and then some of the things that were just happening, like, it didn't seem to really have a point. Like, I don't know, I lost interest, and like the plot just wasn't really there for me. And honestly, the characters started to be a little bit annoying as well. So I just decided to DNF that one as well. The next one that I have is Dark City Omega. I said that I was going to come back to this one, but honestly, the longer I have sat on it, the longer that I'm just like, I am not that interested. I think it's because of the dynamic that they have with each other. Like, as soon as the love interest was introduced, like, that's when I started to not really be interested in the story, because the dynamic that they have with each other, like, he's basically like claiming her and like taking possession of her, and then this like Omega, because I guess that's like the whole Alpha Omega thing. I haven't really like dived into that kind of like romance before, but the issue that I have with that is that like this is a Black woman and a white man, and we all know like the history of just that kind of dynamic, especially when it comes to slavery and all of that. So I could not bring myself to actually care. And just the dynamic just felt cringy to me. I'm not saying that all like interracial relationships have that like dynamic, but I think in this one, in this supernatural context, like I could not. The next one that I have is Elemental Inferno, and this is another one that I think that a lot of people will probably like. I think that the writing was amazing in this one. I think the steamy scenes were fine, but this is just erotica. I don't really do erotica, and I knew that going in, but I ended up getting this on like some free Stuff Your Kindle thing, and I was just like, let me try it because the actual magic system sounds interesting, because it's like the 4 seasons of in terms of like weather, and they are personified, and there's like some mystery of like what happened to the last person. Was it Summer? I believe it was Summer, but honestly, it was just basically sex scenes, and that's erotica for you, but I wanted more with the plot rather than like the steamy scene. So I just decided to DNF it. And then we have The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. This one I was liking in the beginning, but I think that this one also had pacing issues, which is crazy because like their main series is longer than this, but this one is like 400 pages. But I feel like we're just following like too many people, and I just started to get bored. Like, I don't think it's until like maybe 100 or so pages in that you actually get like when the aliens like come in and invade, and we know that they're going to do that in the summary. And even the people that love the other series by these authors, they just weren't really liking this, and I was just like, I'm not going to finish this. Plus it was due at the library, so it just allowed it to get off of my TBR even faster. And then we have the Waning. I went on a whole rant about this book on Instagram, and I just, gosh, like this book, I just knew in my bones that it was not going to be good. Like, I just knew the way that the author was marketing this book, it was just, gosh, like, I just knew I need to like really start listening to my intuition, because this book was a train wreck. It had some steamy scenes that were cringy at best. It had interesting elements in terms of like the world, but like I feel like the plot went nowhere. The character that we were following was so annoying. I don't think that the writing was good. It had potential, and like I knew it would, it needed more editing, because the author was marketing it as she couldn't get an agent and all of this. So a few months later, she decided to just self-publish it. I'm just like, there's a whole process that you go through. Editing needed to be had in this book, and that's all I will say on this. I don't know how this book ended. I was part of a book club that was reading it, and I didn't go to the last one because honestly, this book was taking up enough of my time. So I DNF'd it at whatever percent I have on the screen. And then I have The Thief. This one was a book that was part of a read along that I think is still happening. And this one, I was frankly just bored. I don't like travel fantasy. And I know that after the halfway mark or whatever, like it starts to get more interesting and into the politics. But frankly, I got 61% into this and I still did not care. And no, I decided to DNF it. And I hate that. But I'm like, why am I so far into a book and this is boring as hell? Like, this is so boring. I feel like the character that we were following, he just was very like passive because like his role wasn't a part of it yet, and it was just not interesting to me. And so I just decided to DNF it because honestly, I don't have the time to be wasting on books that I just am not enjoying. So yeah. And then we have the book to favorite for some, and that is Immortal Dark. I just, gosh, like, I had hopes for this. I did. And I think that is saying something that I need to stop hoping that these YA books are going to be good. Because this one, it felt like it was trying too hard for me. Like, I think that there is a balance between like being dark, but then just being like faux dark. Like I don't know. I feel like this book was trying too hard to be like dark, and the writing just felt very choppy to me. I didn't really like the main character, whatever her name is. I just could not really stand being in her perspective. And then I know that there was going to be like the whole thing with like the vampire love interest, and frankly, that dynamic was not that interesting to me at all. So yeah, I just decided to DNF it. All of the people that loved it, I'm happy for you. But yeah, this just was not it for me. And I can just see the sequel just being not good either. So yeah, I just decided to cut my losses on this one as well. And then we have 25Z Time and Salvation. This one borderline hurt because I was definitely enjoying this one in the beginning. I really liked being in this world and like seeing like the setup of this sci-fi plot. It's a dystopian and they're trying to stop the end of the world. And I have been hyping this book up in my head. Like I really thought that this was going to be 5 stars for me. But I think around like the 200, 300 page mark, like the main character started to really annoy me. I don't know what it was. I just started to get very annoyed with being in this character's head, and I much preferred following the characters that were more adults that seemed to know a lot more what was going on. But what really got me in this book is that this is very much a fast-paced action story. And I think that the action scenes started to go on a little bit too long for me. And I am not a big fan of very long action scenes. And that is pretty much what this book was giving me after the 200-page mark. Just constant action. I really wanted more connection with like the characters, but this is just very action packed, very fast paced, very much into like the sci-fi technical part of it too, and like fight scenes and stuff. Like I just was not interested in any of that. So I think readers that want that will enjoy this book, but I am not that kind of reader, so I just decided to DNF it. And then I have Crown of Ellova. This was a fantasy romance that I received an arc for by the author. And this one, I was frankly kind of just bored with this one as well. And I feel like I made a mistake by reading the back summary of what this book was supposed to be about. But I don't even want to call that a mistake because that's what the summary is for. But the reason I even say that is because I was almost halfway through the book and the things that they said happened in the summary still had not happened. And I was just like, I'm pretty much going to know the entire book and I did not need to read this. And I hate that for me because I've been looking for angst, pining, yearning. But another thing with this book is that I think that the pining was definitely one sided. I didn't think that the characters had any chemistry at all, which I hate to say. But yeah, and also, side note, and this is like no shade, but like I am just very a little bit confused with like the marketing in this one, just because I see a lot more character art for one of the black girl side characters, and it doesn't even seem like she has like a huge role in this, and I'm just very confused on why the author has like three different character art things for a character that's not even a big part of the story. So I will leave that where it is. And then we have, unfortunately, Francine. This one, I wanted to dive into dark romance, and I heard that this one was definitely a dark romance. And wow, like when I first started this book, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Like he kidnaps her and all of that, but I was thoroughly enjoying myself. The sexual tension between these two characters was top tier. I don't know. I was questioning like why am I liking this guy that kidnapped her and all this other stuff, and I just wow. It was like the tension was so high. I was just holding my breath like while I was reading this book, and I was just in love like so much. And oh gosh, I loved it so much. And then we get to like the 40-ish% mark of this book, and I feel like it just started dragging so much. Like I feel like that tension wasn't even there. Like he married her and they had sex with each other, but then, yeah, like that was pretty much it. And I was like, where else is this story going? And then when I went to reviews, it seems that this book did like a whole 180 and just went in a completely different direction. And I was just like, you know what? I'm out. I'm just going to keep that first half of this book in my mind because that would have been 5 stars. But the rest of that book, no. The next one is The Spirit Cuts Through Water. And this one, I appreciate what it is. I think that it has beautiful writing. I really love like the setup of this world and just like the setup of how this author is telling the story. There's like moving parts to all of this. There's a kid listening to a story of these like gods and all of this from his grandmother. But then there's also this dream theater. And then there's also the story of these two people journeying to bring like a moon goddess somewhere. And all of those things were very interesting to me. At first, the narrative style confused me, but then once I got into it, I was really into it. And then I got confused again, and I just feel like I was just way too confused. And then the story is just very slow. And I was way more intrigued with like the story of these two guys taking the moon goddess somewhere, and everything else I just was not that interested in. And so even though I'm still very intrigued with like where that one storyline goes, I was just not enjoying my time reading like the other ones, and I'm sad about this one because I really appreciate just like the literary aspect of this, but the actual story part of this, I just could not get into. And then we have The Blessed, which is one that I found on NetGalley. And this one I think could have been very good. I really appreciate just all of like the historical magical aspects that they brought into it. There were Orishas, and then there was also like hoodoo, voodoo, and just root magic, I believe, and just all of these cultural inspirations into the magic, which I really appreciated. And I also thought that once you get past like the unnecessary like prologue and like the background info dumping, like I actually thought that the characters could have been like a very interesting mix. You have one character that is like a half demon, half human woman who has been alive for the longest. And then you have another woman that is kind of like a descendant from a very powerful Orisha. And this is supposed to be their love story in the midst of Lilith from the Christian faith coming back and trying to absorb the Orisha descendants' power. So cool setup. But I just think that this story also had pacing issues. I think that their romance could have been good, but I think as soon as like the sex was introduced at the midpoint, it just felt too like sudden for me. And then it just, I don't know, like the pacing of their romance and then just like the external plot things, like I just don't think that it was working well. And I think that I would try more by this author because I really like those elements that I talked about in terms of like the magic and just like the chemistry that they had in the beginning. But I just don't think that it was pulled off well towards the middle of the book. And then there is His Dark Reflection. This book was something. I don't even I'm trying to be nice because like it's not that it wasn't bad, but like I just this book was I'll just speak plainly in that like the writing was not the best. I think that the characters were not fully fleshed out and their voices were not that good either. And I think that the plot had some things like the whole thing with this is that there's like an evil stepbrother or something, or an evil like twin or something that is taking over the life of his other twin, but like you know that when you're like reading the book. And so I'm just very confused with like, is this supposed to be like a mystery thriller aspect? But like it just didn't seem like it. Like it just feels like the villain of this one was very much just too one dimensional for me. And I think that the story could have been okay. But if there was actually like a mystery thriller aspect of this where you bring like that tension and you bring that like mystery of like what's going to happen and stuff that you usually find in a mystery thriller, maybe it could have been decent. But we're getting all of these different perspectives. So I just don't think that we really got any of that. So I don't know. And then the last one that I DNF'd was Chainbreakers. This one I also got an arc of, and I think that the world building could have been interesting. They are basically pirates shepherding the people that have been thrown over while they were making their way across the transatlantic slave trade. But honestly, I feel like this one just suffered from a lot of like info dumping. So the pacing just felt off, and the character could have been interesting. She is a young girl that has been named captain because her parents have been thrown overboard and all of that. So she wants to go search for her father. But yeah, this one was purely just the execution of the story that I just could not vibe with. But that will wrap up the rest of the 2024 DNFs that I had. It was something else. A lot of stories had potential, but I think one of the things that a lot of readers have been talking about, and I'm definitely included in this, is that I think that we need to bring editing back because a lot of them could have been good, like I said, if we had like better editors to like trim like the pacing. And yeah, I think that we could have had some great stories, but it's just those little things that just did not work. So yeah, I thank you so much for watching. If you have liked this video, please like and maybe comment like your worst book of the year or a book that you DNF'd in 2024, or you can just leave like a red circle or red like something to mark that like these books were just not it. But again, I thank you so much for watching and I will see you in my next video. Bye.